My name is Lindsay Lambert. I'm the Program Director for PowerHouse Texas, and we're so glad to have you today for our Energy Innovation Forum on energy efficiency. The goal of our Energy Innovation Forums is to bring together academics, community leaders, industry leaders, and policymakers to explore the ins and outs of emerging energy technologies to help inform policy solutions for Texas. We wanted to call today's forum Energy Efficiency Isn't Sexy, but it should be, because we know that energy efficiency is a low-hanging fruit, right? And we should be doing more of it. But why aren't we? To help us answer that question, we've invited a great lineup of speakers for you today. State Representative Rafael Anchía, repping House District 103, Stefania Tomaskovic, Director of the Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience, or CEER for short. Dr. Sergio Castellanos, Assistant Professor in Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering at UT Austin. Noah Oakes, State and Local Policy Manager with the South Central Partnership for Energy Efficiency as a Resource, or SPEER for short. And last but not least, Jason M. Ryan, Executive Vice President of Regulatory Services and Government Affairs for CenterPoint Energy. So, a little bit about us. PowerHouse Texas was formed last year by the Texas Caucus on Climate and Energy. PowerHouse Texas is a nonpartisan nonprofit that educates and cultivates energy policy leaders through these energy innovation forums, as well as through the Energy Policy Fellowship, where we have placed 6 fellows in 3 Republican offices and 3 Democratic offices that are working on energy bills this legislative session. I believe most of our energy policy fellows are here today. Can y'all please stand and be recognized? Hafiz, Natalie, Denise in the back. Thank y'all so much. Next, we want to thank the chair of the Texas Caucus on Climate and Energy, Representative Erin Zwiener, for her vision and leadership. We'd also like to thank our funders, the Energy Foundation, Mitchell Foundation, the Jacob and Therese Hershey Foundation, Climate Works, and the Meadow Foundation. All right. So I'm going to give you 2 questions, and we're going to see who knows what. First, the QR code doesn't work. You'll want to go pull out your phone. There's another way, I promise. Pull out your phone, go to www.menti.com, and then you're going to enter this code. And so when you get to the instruction site page, thank you. If you can give me a thumbs up to let me know you're there. Awesome. All right. So the first question, are you ready for it? I have some Jeopardy music I will sing for you. In 2020, is everybody there? Can you give me a thumbs up if you're there? Okay. Apologies. The code is 1518-8855. Let me know if you're ready for the next slide. All right. In 2020, the Texas Department of Transportation retrofitted more than 700 traffic signals with energy-efficient LED light bulbs, saving how much money? $7,000 a year? $70,000 a year? $700,000 a year? Or $7 million a year? Do, 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 do. I know there are more. Oh, okay. Any more? Awesome. And is everybody ready to get the answer? Bated breath. $700,000 TxDOT saved by installing LED light bulbs, 700 traffic lights in 2020. Next question for you. Compared to other states, how does Texas rank in terms of state energy efficiency policies and programs? 12th, 29th, 38th, or 50th? Do, 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 You still have time. All right. And the answer is, it's a map answer. Texas is 29th, according to the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, their 2022 State Energy Efficiency Scorecard. Was that fun? Did you enjoy that? Okay.
So thank you so much for having me here. I'm Noah Oakes with SPEER, our state and local policy manager. Just quickly about us, as in my role, I help us pursue our mission to accelerate and adopt the advancement of building systems and energy efficient products and services in both Texas and Oklahoma. And you can see up here, there's a list of our members and kind of the areas that we work in. So getting kind of what the meat is of this presentation is what exactly is energy efficiency to start with, kind of give you a high level overview. The Department of Energy defines it as the use of less energy to perform the same task. And so one of the things you can think of are looking at maybe Energy Star appliances. Maybe, if you're like me and I had a old dryer years ago that took me 3 or 4 times to dry versus a newer one, it only takes me 1 and it's so much better now. Thinking about your home envelope and the heating and cooling systems that we have. So whether it's a air conditioning or furnace unit or maybe a heat pump, as you see as a picture here, being able to keep your home at an appropriate climate so that you are safe and comfortable throughout the days of Texas, where we have super hot summers sometimes and super cold winters more and more frequently. Also thinking of weatherization like windows and insulation, where Texas, we are 2/3 of our homes are over 20 years old. So we have a lot of homes that are lacking some of this appropriate or adequate insulation or kind of window upgrades, which really helps keep, when you have them upgraded, keep some of that hot air in and the cool air in when you need it. And ultimately what energy efficiency does is it shifts the demand curve for energy in the state, which Texas desperately needs, as we've set several records over the last few years for demand. And in doing so, we're now in this conversation. Representative Anchía is very focused on this, I've been told, looking at some of our different possibilities from the PUC and our wholesale market redesign, looking at whether it's going to be a supply side generation focus or a demand side. This is where energy efficiency is on that demand side and can really be cost effective, help build up our resiliency and our reliability, and it's clean. So I want to provide you guys a quick historical overview of kind of energy efficiency programming in Texas. I just want to first preface this by saying this is primarily focused at the investor-owned utilities, not so much the municipal programs or the co-ops, because we do have the deregulated market here in Texas, which was established in 1999 by SB 7. What's interesting about this piece of legislation is it's not just the first energy efficiency resource standard for Texas, but it's the first in the nation. So at the time when we just had that question where we're 29th, we were actually first back in the early 2000s because we were the first state to have an energy efficiency standard. And what that established is that we would have a demand reduction goal of 10% of demand growth a year from the utilities. So over the next 5 or 6 years, the programs are being developed, implemented, and we see additional legislation which provided guidance in 2005 for the standard offer programs, for the market transformation programs, self-delivered programs, what kind of things can be included in there. So it's like the insulation, windows, HVAC upgrades, things like that. And then a couple years later, as you see in 2007, the legislature saw that these programs are really effective and sought to increase the goals from 10% to 20% of demand growth. A couple years, let me back up for a second. In that piece of legislation, there's also 2 important things that come out. First is an industrial opt-out, which is included in this legislation. So the industrial customers are no longer included in our energy efficiency programs if they opt out. Additionally, this was the first and last time that Texas had an energy efficiency potential study that was commissioned by the state. And that's showed that we actually, even today, our goals are actually behind what that energy efficiency potential study showed back in 2008 when it was published. So going forward a couple of years, the PUC, in the first time in the history of these programs, as you can see, without legislative direction, chose to increase the goals again because, again, the popularity of these programs from 20% of load growth or of demand growth to 30%. And in the following legislative session, it was codified into law from SB 1125. And then that also established a trigger mechanism, which several of our utilities use today, which says once they meet that 30% demand growth, it then will switch over to 0.4% of peak demand for the utilities for their new goal. And you can't go backwards once you hit that level. You're at the 0.4%. I believe CenterPoint, who's in the room, and Jason's going to be speaking, is at that goal. Encore and AEP are the 3 utilities, if I'm not mistaken. But then, as you can see, from 2011 to pretty much now, there has not been any legislation that has been passed as it relates to energy efficiency goals in our programs. We do have a 2019 PUC administrative changes, which wasn't really substantive in process. It was just kind of changing some of the language and verbiage. And then obviously we see the Winter Storm Uri really brought a heightened awareness to energy efficiency and load management. And then today, where we're seeing various pieces of legislation coming out of the legislature. So where does that leave us today? So first and foremost, our programs at the program level, so each individual program has to be cost effective in its first year running. It has to be, as I mentioned earlier, we have the annual goals here, which are for just residential and commercial customers. And in this annual goal, it does include both energy efficiency and load management, which there is a distinction that should be noted there, because load management, while very important, and SPEER obviously, and I think everyone here agrees it's very important in those peak times, but energy efficiency is more of that holistic approach to reducing our demand. The rules also stipulate the incentive payments the utilities can provide to third-party implementers and contractors to really try and implement those programs. It gives some of the administration, whether it's reporting, measurement, costs, looking at research and development, and it outlines the different types of programs we have. And then lastly, it also targets a low-income program with 10% of the program budgets each year for the utilities, which can be very difficult for some of the utilities depending on their service territory. And also, as we just mentioned in the previous session, the networking session we had just before this, there's a lot of challenges when you have some home envelopes that are maybe not as adequate or maybe need a little bit more work kind of structurally to get so they're able to work on these actual energy efficiency projects. The next two sections of this chapter focus on the energy efficiency cost recovery factor, which is essentially the bonus for utilities to perform these programs. It's not meant to give them to make them whole again, but it is definitely an incentive program for utilities so that they're getting some sort of compensation in return for essentially, once implemented these programs, selling less energy overall. And also the last chapter, 25-183, just kind of talks about the evaluation of the energy efficiency program, some of the reporting, and the energy efficiency implementation project, which is a biannual public meeting that actually occurs here in a couple of weeks, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So how are we looking as a state? So this is a 5-year snapshot, and realistically, this is kind of, it really goes all the way back to the beginning of 2005 when we really started monitoring these programs, but we've consistently, as you can see, the gray line is our adjusted demand goals, and our blue line, the dark blue line, is the actual evaluated demand reductions that we've seen for all of the utilities in the state. And as you can see, we have continuously had all of the utilities exceeding their demand goals. However, when you look at that third line, that light blue, when you take out load management from those goals, it becomes a lot more challenging for utilities to continue up at that high reduction rate. And then this slide I always like to put up, it's really important. Both these last two slides come from the Public Utility Commission's EM&V contractor. So it comes from them directly, not from SPEER analysis or anything. But this shows the cost-benefit ratio for energy efficiency. And as you can see, it's consistently been a very beneficial program throughout the state. So I just want to give you guys a couple of ongoing actions, and then I'll kind of have one more slide, and we'll kick it over to the panel discussion. So first, ongoing, obviously, we're in the middle of a legislative session. Very exciting. A lot of things going on here. A lot of pieces of legislation that I'm still trying to comb through from last week's filing deadline. I'm just a one-person team for SPEER. I'm sure many of you guys are struggling as well. Also, as I mentioned before, the PUC's two-phased wholesale electricity market redesign is still in the process of being worked through. But the key phase for us as an organization, as well as for this discussion, is that the Public Utility Commission exclusively named out demand response and their demand response item to set higher performance standards for energy efficiency. And so nothing's been done yet on that other than a couple of working groups that is this next bullet point. But we do have the new commissioner who's been focused on energy efficiency programs and how to better them over the hopefully next few months. And then as I mentioned earlier, we have the March 28th EEIP meeting, which is a public meeting through the Public Utility Commission. Happy to talk to anyone about that as well. Yeah. So looking forward to the discussion, but I just wanted to kind of preface this by there's a number of things that have been brought up throughout these discussions on how to better the rules for energy efficiency. Many of the questions revolve around the goals. Are they currently appropriate? Is the 0.4% or 30% really the appropriate standard? Should we have higher? Should we pull out, as I mentioned, a couple bullets lower, load management from energy efficiency goals? Another question that keeps coming up, and I think there's a lot of progress and a lot of consensus on this next one, but cost effectiveness standard. So as I mentioned at the start, cost effectiveness at the program level really kind of hinders utilities' flexibility with some of these programs, whereas if they were looking at a portfolio holistic approach where they can kind of average out some of their scores for maybe some of the low income programs, which are historically really hard to be cost effective, with some of the more higher performing, it can really help balance out and provide the utilities flexibility to administer these programs. As I mentioned, the role load management, where should that play? And also low-income programs and those needs. Is 10% of the current budget enough? Should we look at distinct targeted low-income programs? And also looking at the role of industrial customers. And should there be opt-outs? Should they be encouraged to report some of their energy efficiency? Things like that. And then lastly, looking at rep participation. The retail electric providers, should they be more involved? Should some of their contracting be helpful for not just some of the demand response, but getting into some of those energy efficiency programs as well. I know this is not intended to be an inclusive list of everything. There's so many other things to talk about, but I don't want to take up too much more time, so I'll pass it over to Mose and the panel. And there's my contact information if anyone's interested. Thank you.
My name is Mose Buchele, and I am the Energy and Environment Correspondent at the local NPR station here. It's KUT 90.5, and I also host a podcast called The Disconnect, Power Politics and the Texas Blackout. It's about energy reliability in Texas, and so in that context, you may hear me asking a few questions specifically to the reliability side of energy efficiency, how it can help bolster our state grid. Energy efficiency is it's a challenging topic to report on, frankly. It can come across as kind of dry, and so it's difficult to tell stories about. But like you said, it also is one of these things that has such promise. As a journalist, when I hear people refer to a win-win situation, I typically write it off pretty quickly because, come on, like what's a win-win situation here, really? But energy efficiency, it's hard to find a downside. It's cheaper, it saves people money, it's better for the environment, and like I said, it has all these other types of effects, like we could talk about energy reliability. It's also something in the context of some bills we've seen recently introduced, especially in the state Senate, that focus specifically on the demand side of things that I think is important to discuss and address here, which made me especially happy to participate in this today. So without further ado, I will allow each panelist to introduce themselves, and then we'll dive in. Representative Anchía, you want to begin?
Thank you, Mose. Rafael Anchía, member of the legislature representing Dallas, Irving, Carrollton, Farmers Branch. I'm in my 10th session, serve on the Energy Committee and also State Affairs, so I'm going to be sort of at that cross-section of technology, stewardship of the earth, and energy production. That's where I've chosen to spend a lot of my legislative time during my 10 sessions and find myself in the middle of it again. I'm really grateful to be here with all of you today. I happen to get jazzed by energy efficiency, and so thank you for those diehards who are in the room today who have come to learn and listen, as I am at this point. I just want to, at the outset, remind everybody, and I think Noah's timeline was fantastic because energy efficiency has always had a broad bipartisan consensus in the legislature. I've worked on some of the earliest energy efficiency bills right after I got elected in 2005. The big energy efficiency bill that we saw up there was authored by none other than Republican State Representative and later Speaker of the House, Joe Straus, who was responsible for really moving the needle on energy efficiency. And over the years, we've had Representatives John Rainey, members of the Senate, all of whom understand both sort of the progressive qualities of energy efficiency in that it's good for the earth, good for the environment, and the conservative principles, those conserving energy, not wasting energy, that type of stewardship that is oftentimes interesting to some of my colleagues in the Republican Party. So I'm really also grateful to Representative Erin Zwiener for her leadership. I got to tell you, assembling a very powerful bipartisan caucus alongside Representative Chairman Darby, that that is a broad cross-section of the legislature. It's no small feat. And then implementing a leadership program like PowerHouse is equally impressive. I mean, but for her leadership and Chairman Darby's leadership, we would not be able to move the needle like this. And it's my extreme good fortune to have a PowerHouse fellow in Natalie Villafranca of the Farmers Branch Villafrancas as someone I get to work with on a daily basis. So without further delay, I'll just mention to you, and we can explore this a little bit more in the Q&A. I filed 2 energy efficiency bills, House Bill 8784, which seeks to increase utilities' energy efficiency goals incrementally over time up to 5%, and it includes a residential demand response program as well. And then we also have House Bill 4811, and I worked very closely with PUC Commissioner Jackson on this. It has become one of their priorities, and that is to create a council for energy efficiency. And this can, I think that because we have this broad bipartisan consensus, and now the administrative agency is also sees the importance and value of energy efficiency, I think the next couple of years can be very exciting for this subject matter. So with that, I'll stop and thank the other panelists for participating.
Right, Stefania.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Stefania Tomaskovic, and I'm the director of the Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience. We are a Houston-based organization, and we formed after Hurricane Harvey. So I know many of you remember August 2017 when Harvey really devastated a portion of Texas. And those of us in the Houston area recognized that Harvey just created a couple different things. First off, we saw the disparities that already existed come to the surface. And then as we began our work together in coalition, we saw those disparities widen. So there are people today who are still recovering from Harvey. And our goal is to focus on making the greater Houston region more resilient. And I am so delighted to be speaking with you today about energy efficiency because I believe that is one of the solutions that we have at our fingertips. Low-hanging fruit, that's a word I've heard today already, that can really help support people, help make their homes more resilient to extreme weather, and really provide good jobs to communities. People are really hungry for this kind of work. And I'm excited to be here today. I do want to just mention really quickly that the way CEER operates is we do things in collaboration with community. So today, I'll get to tell you some stories about the work that we do and how we do it and some of the results that we've had from our interactions with community members, because we feel like it's really important for community to help drive our work and our vision. And part of our work, especially in Northeast Houston, was developed through a survey which our climate ambassadors, that's a program that we have of 14 community leaders who have come together to help educate their community about environmental issues. Our climate ambassadors helped spread the word, helped go out into their community, ask their neighbors, ask their churches, ask the people living, their family members, what's important to them around the environment? What are they concerned about in their community? And one of the things that rose to the top was energy efficiency, was having a healthy, safe home. And it's important to the community. It's important to people who lack resources to ensure that they're safe and healthy when next storms, the winter storm or hurricane, whatever storms are arising, that they are protected in their homes. I'll pause for now and tell you all more later.
Thanks, Jason.
I'm Jason Ryan, Executive Vice President at CenterPoint Energy, based out of Houston. For those that aren't familiar with our company, we operate gas and electric utilities throughout the mid-continent from Minnesota down to the Gulf Coast. We have the privilege to serve more than 7.5 million homes and businesses with their energy needs. We also, as part of our business, operate the electric utility down in Houston, and I'll be speaking mostly today about our experience there. With respect to that utility, we occupy a little bit less than 3% of the area of Texas, but consume more than a quarter of the energy of the state. So think about what Houston is. It's not only the third, or soon to be third largest, now fourth largest, but soon to be third largest city in the country, but it also has the largest medical center on the planet, one of the largest petrochemical complexes in the world. One of the largest ports in the country, and is home to the headquarters of more than 25 of Fortune 500 companies in the country. So it's a huge area in terms of energy consumption. So one of the first bills I ever testified on in the legislature was actually Representative Anchía's 2011 energy efficiency bill, because energy efficiency is one of the tools in our toolboxes to address energy needs. And so shame on us as Texans if we don't figure out how to continue to use it, not only for electricity, but for gas, which I'll talk about later on in the program.
Yeah, that should be interesting.
But the if you look at what we've accomplished so far since I testified on that bill in 2011, we've reduced peak usage in the Houston area by more than 1,000 megawatts versus what it would have otherwise been. So as the State House thinks about how to address having enough energy to power Texas going forward, imagine how much bigger that problem would be if we hadn't already reduced the peak usage in the largest city in the state by more than 1,000 megawatts, right? That means we have an even bigger problem. So it has to be part of the all the above solution, and Texas has done a lot, but there's a lot yet to do.
Thank you. Sergio.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sergio Castellanos. I'm an assistant professor at UT Austin Civil Architecture and Environmental Engineering. And that's where I lead the RESET Lab, which is Rapid, Equitable, and Sustainable Energy Transition. So I also place a lot of emphasis on the equitable piece of this energy transition discussion. And within the topics that we focus in our lab, we do analysis on the grid. So the power sector, parameterizing ERCOT here locally. We're expanding beyond, and I'll talk about it in a second. We also look into sustainable transportation. As we think about electrifying different fleets, what does that look and how does that impact our grid? And then also, as a third pillar, we're looking at energy and environmental injustice issues, specifically focusing here in Austin. I think there's plenty to talk about within Texas, but it does intersect with other discussions as well. And so within the goal of our lab, as I mentioned, one of the things that we looked at is the power sector. So we've been working on ERCOT, building capacity there, but part of our interest also expands to Latin America. So within that, we have ongoing work and discussions with Colombia, with Panama, article coming out for Honduras, and also building capacity within Mexico. So the energy efficiency discussion that we've developed has particular focus in Mexico in the past. And so that work, which I'll briefly summarize in a bit, centers not only on the benefits of energy efficiency, but more specifically on centering that across commercial and industrial sectors as well. So I think, we typically think on energy efficiency in residential terms, and that's, big slice of the pie. But what we found in many instances is that actually applying energy efficiency measures in other sectors, like productive sectors of the economy, can lead to significant benefits as well, whether it being emissions, savings in terms of kilowatt hours, savings monetary as well. So I think that's yet another thing that we should keep in mind as we're having these discussions. That also served as a good starting point for us to appreciate the need for coordination. And I'll talk about that as well in a second, mostly from the point of view of data development, data acquisition, data provenance. And so we came into this issue that we have to, I would say 50% of the study was developed, centered around coordinating different data sets and just addressing that piece to really put a clear perspective of what the potential is for energy efficiency in the commercial and industrial sector. So pleasure to be here.
Thank you. No, I guess you already kind of introduced yourself, but
Sure.
anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just, I don't know if you guys can hear me yet. There we are. Sorry about that. So yeah, Noah Oaks again. I just would like to expand a little bit about kind of where SPEER fits into this pie as we're talking about here. We do a lot of education with our members who are, various organizations, energy service companies, utilities, but we also try to educate the public as well. As Professor just mentioned, a lot of us think about residential, and rightfully so because of the rules, the way they're set up. We try to do a lot of work within our municipal codes and cities work. We have a local governments program as well that does a lot of really good work with various cities. And then we do a lot of other educational opportunities, webinars, and things like that. And I'm excited to talk about the rest of the stuff here. So
Great. I want to start with a kind of general question to kick it back to Representative Anchía, because we just heard a lot about the promises of energy efficiency and how it can and has been a bipartisan cause in the past, but it's also been something that we've seen we've fallen back on in Texas. We are not leaders anymore, and I've watched as bills have been introduced in past sessions that have not made it through that would help with efficiency in the state. We opened up this entire conversation with if this is such a no-brainer, then what's the holdup? Why are we having these problems?
Yeah, that bipartisan consensus has ebbed and flowed over time. It has not been linear. I wish I could say, we started as the leader of all 50 states, and now we're, as was noted in the flash poll, we're 29th. But that's 29th among states that have energy efficiency programs. So we're really last, to be honest with you. And there's a lot of opportunity for people like Representative Flores, who's new to the legislature, and others to really, embrace energy efficiency as something that's going to occupy their legislative time, right? And vehicles, or like the caucus, like the Climate and Energy Caucus, also allow for there to be a sharing of ideas and experiences, sort of a clearinghouse of good ideas on a nonpartisan basis. And regrettably, I do believe that we're at a delicate point where energy efficiency has been sort of lumped in with renewables, and there's a little bit of hostility, to say it euphemistically, a little bit of hostility related to renewables, and oftentimes while they're different, right, completely different, they get lumped together, and people see these, some members of the legislature, if they have not studied energy efficiency well, have a knee-jerk reaction against it. But it is events like this, fora like the caucus, and then candidly, when business steps to the fore and says, "Hey, you know what? We have avoided 1,000 megawatts of demand in Houston, Texas." That is, a pretty significant expenditure in generation that we have also avoided, and that's also good, especially when we're experiencing tight margins on the grid, right? And so I think it's events like this that will help us maybe take a quantum leap this session in our goals in the legislature. It's going to be business, it's going to be NGOs, legislators, and others speaking across chambers and across the aisle.
I'm curious also about you mentioned the issue of grid reliability, and that is kind of an opening for energy efficiency. Are there any new developments when we look at things like the infrastructure bill that was passed, or all the climate spending that was announced that the Biden administration passed? Is there more money for efficiency in any of these now that states could avail themselves of?
Absolutely. I think there's plenty of different programs that are out there, but it's incumbent upon some of our state agencies and the legislature to appropriate some of those funds, go for those funds where they're available, whether it's the HERA programs, whether it's some of the other energy efficiency homes rebates programs. There's a lot of legislation or funding from the legislation that's come out from the IRA and the IIJA.
Your bill proposes a council of sorts. Could you explain a little bit more about that, and could that play a role in this type of thing?
It certainly could. It's in anticipation of, the almost $800 million that are available, right? If the state will go out and compete for them. And it is a cross-section of state agencies that are going to meet on a regular basis to discuss the most efficient way to use dollars that flow from the RIA or the IJIA to the state, right? And look, if it is designed to promote efficiency in decision making as well. If all of these agencies operated in silos, we might not be able to either work together to draw down the most amount of money, or have an inefficiency in distribution and execution of energy efficiency programs. So that is the design. Everybody from the relevant stakeholder agencies throughout state government will be meeting on a regular basis to work together on EE.
How many years has it been since, I think you kind of gave this in your preface, but since we increased our energy efficiency goals now in the state?
So the last time was 2011 that we increased it from that. And that's kind of it's a little bit confusing, right? It happened in 2010 with the Public Utility Commission and was codified to that 30% of reduction of demand growth, and then with that trigger mechanism as well. But that's been 12 years or so since we've actually increased the goals.
And Representative Anchía, another one of your proposals would have the state again go back to review those goals and increase them.
And increase them. That's right.
That would primarily be through residential, but through savings in residential and commercial, through efficiency plans in residential and commercial. What is the state of that now? And I guess, Stefania, I'd like to ask you, when we set these goals and then we send out, we have groups that maybe are contracted out to go out and try to achieve energy efficiency savings in residents. What does that look like? You've been talking to people on the ground, people living in homes who sounds like would like more efficient homes.
Yeah, that's correct. And so the funding is coming from the state, from Department of Energy, and from Human Health and Human Services. Thank you. And in a place like Houston, what that would look like for a resident who fits the criteria for low-income weatherization is that they would apply through Baker Ripley is the local service provider for that. And there's challenges. Just something that may seem very basic to those of us with a smartphone is access to internet, right? And not everyone has access to internet, something that is, for all means, a basic utility now. So that in itself poses a challenge. Do people have access to applying for this program? And for a lot of seniors in low-income communities, that's not the case. The other issue that can happen is people will apply for the program, find out that they need home repairs once they get in line and are ready to go. They need to do home repairs before they can actually get their homes weatherized, and that sets things back. Oftentimes people can't get their homes weatherized right away, especially low-income community members. So that takes even more time. They have to reapply. So there's a lot of barriers to applying for these kinds of programs within the community. And one of the things that we're actually working on with one of our partners, Houston Advanced Research Center, is a pilot program through Department of Energy. And CEER's role in that is actually doing focus groups and other kinds of work with community to better understand where are these barriers to access in weatherization programs, and what are the things that we can do or service providers can do to eliminate those barriers so there can be more participation by people who need these services the most. So I think it's really important to take that kind of perspective of understanding where community is and what they see as the limitations, and try to address them and work very closely in partnership with them in order to overcome those challenges. And
those types of barriers aside, we were talking before the panel started as well just about the money issue. I mean, if it doesn't sound like there's currently funding to get people the efficiency that they might want, even if we dealt with all the other obstacles in their way.
Yeah, I think having a more robust investment in community programs and weatherization would really help a number of people. Just thinking about the human impact, right? When I think about Winter Storm Uri and the hundreds of people who died who had their home been weatherized, they may have been a lot more comfortable in their homes, especially looking around the greater Houston area and in the communities where we work. A lot of the homes are old, right? They're built in the 1930s, 1940s. And And during these kinds of extreme weather events, they're just not designed for them. They're not designed. So it is incredibly important, these kinds of programs, and this investing more money in a place where, like Houston, where these kinds of extremes, I mean, anywhere in Texas, really, where these kinds of extremes can happen, I think is just really critical.
I think a lot of people think about residential when they think about efficiency. Sergio, I know that you also, like, as you said, have looked at the promise of efficiency in the industrial sector, which I think a lot of people would be surprised to understand is there's an exemption for in Texas. So maybe not something that's even on the table right now. But what do you see there? What you said, you were talking about what percentage of you can save when you start looking at industrial.
Right. So I think the interesting case of the conversations that happened in Mexico was that this was co-led by industry. So this was facilitated by the German arm of support, GIZ, if that rings a bell. But essentially, they brought industry together. They brought the utility, the National Commission for Energy Efficiency, and say, okay, what can we feasibly achieve? And I think that's the key word, because it wasn't imposed like let's achieve 100% by 20-something. It was more driven by things that could be achieved in a specific timeline. And so that brought a set of different actions across different industry, mining, paper, glass, cement, steel making, so the most energy intensive, agriculture as well, water pumping. And it said identify some specific processes. And so from that, one can start teasing things out and say, okay, this could be electrified. This could have this potential of energy efficiency increment. And so through that type of breakdown analysis, we collect that, it's in the 140-something million tons of CO2 avoided, $11 billion in savings, and so there's a lot of benefits. And really, as I mentioned, it's driven by things that the industry knows that they can potentially achieve should there be some sort of mechanisms to finance. And that's always the little big caveat, how to finance things. But I think at least some thoughts are being put into how to make that a reality. There are also some leakage issues that one can envision when you have a corporation that it's operating in different across different countries. Then they might play the game of just moving things around and try to overcome some of these challenges elsewhere. But anyway, I think a lot of potential, industry lead, and I think that's what should open the conversation and excite people about the benefits.
Yeah, I think another place where I haven't done much considering of efficiency is in the natural gas sector, and I know, Jason, you wanted to talk about that a little bit. What can we do to be more efficient about our use of gas?
So appreciate the question. It's not terribly different than electric, right? So energy use is energy use, regardless of the fuel that's providing the energy. So our experience for the last 30 years is that it's important to address that on the natural gas side as well. There's just no framework currently in statute in Texas to tell us how to accomplish that. So there is a bill, House Bill 2263 by Chairman Darby, where we hope to accomplish on the gas side what Representative Anchía has led our state in accomplishing on the electric side. So depending on the temperature outside, the gas system can deliver just as much energy, if not more, than the electric grid. We just don't think about it because the gas infrastructure, for example, that I operate here in Texas is all underground, so we just don't think about it. But we need to put just as much energy, if you will, into energy efficiency on the gas side as we do on the electric side. We have in some of our states where we operate, we use 5 times more energy on the gas system than we do on the electric system. So I think a real opportunity missed if we don't take this all of the above approach that we have on the electric side to the gas side as well.
Well, we promised to leave a little room for questions here as well, and so I'd like to open it up now to the audience. If there are any questions, anybody wants to pitch them up towards us here. Yes, and the question was, how do you kind of do outreach for communities where to let them know about energy efficiency more? Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sion. I think there's a few different things. In terms of our survey, we were asking residents what kind of challenges they faced. And one of the major challenges that we identified through that survey was high electricity costs, right? So I think talking to people about the possibility of saving money through energy efficiency is something that resonates with a lot of people, because in the communities where we're working, people are paying a lot in electricity costs. There's a lot of issues around electricity. People are on prepaid plans. They end up in the middle of the summer getting their power cut off because they can't afford electricity. So talking about, I think, the financial impact is one thing that really resonates with people and helps them see the value to their health, to their pocketbook, all the above, right?
And if I could just piggyback on that really quickly, there was a recent survey that suggested that 45% of Texans had to make decisions between food, basic necessities, medicine, and their energy bill. And we've uplifted some costs since Uri to consumers and into the system. So it's not surprising that we'd get that, but that really is where people are feeling pain, and I think they would be open to any discussion on how to alleviate some of that pain.
Yeah, you wanted to?
Yeah, and if I can add, there's also like a famous study that shows it's not only a communication issue, but also an affordability and accessibility. So in Michigan, what they did is they surveyed in one county the location or the abundance of LEDs, light bulbs, essentially, and they found that in low income, there wasn't as many as you would find in Home Depot or Lowe's, for example. But those stores were not reachable to them. So even if you want to access them, it's hard for them to reach. And then the second piece of the story is because they're smaller, you cannot benefit of those large scales, they're more expensive. So harder to access and more expensive to purchase. And so even though people are conscious, they put it high on their, on their issues list, it's hard for them to come by and adopt those solutions as well.
So the question was, are we considering measuring energy efficiency differently if under the rules of conditions of some federal some funding that's available?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I'll kick us off on that, just because it does hit home. I see Amy over here from Frontier as well. She's been in with some of our working groups, or she's in all the working groups, I believe. But that's one of the things that at the Public Utility Commission level, we've spoke about whether it's looking at the avoided costs and how we update the TRM so that the utilities are getting the right valuation for the measures that they're putting out there, but also so that we're making sure that we are. I think that's part of it, is also looking at so we're ready for the future. But I think that's definitely part of the discussion. I don't know from a legislative standpoint. I don't think I've seen any bills yet looking at specific measurement, but I know from the regulatory side of things we are.
Yeah.
I mean, the benefits would be even greater if the legislature measured externalities, of energy production in a way, and how some of those externalities are socialized to average Texans. I mean, that would certainly be a game changer. That will likely not happen in my tenure in the legislature.
Okay, it looks like we have one more, and then probably going to have to wrap it. Yes. So the question was about programs that could make some of these efficiency programs more appealing to moderate income folks, and what utilities' perspectives are on that, especially given higher interest rates, which makes these things a little more difficult to finance. Jason.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a stab at it. So this is something that we've worked on mostly in our northern states, where we have looked at financing on the bill, programs that go beyond what the utility offers. And I do think that it's important for us to continue to think about that. The programs that I offer as a utility don't require the recipient of the program to pay anything. But question whether or not that's where we want to stop, right? And I think it goes to a larger question, and the issues have been raised already of sometimes the home doesn't qualify for the measure because there's something else wrong with the home that needs to be fixed first, right? So I'm not going to weatherize a home if there's not a window in one of the rooms. I don't have a program that pays to put a window in one of the rooms. Maybe I should, right? And it gets to the larger question of, I don't know that we have yet gotten as mature in Texas to think about what amount of energy efficiency is the right amount. So all over the rest of the country, outside of Texas, there are integrated resource plans that utilities go through that identify how much energy efficiency do I want to invest in before I invest in a power plant. And because we have split the industry into pieces, in Texas, we don't have a place to go to have that integrated resource plan. So as the representative mentioned, we are spending billions of dollars, we've been told, of consumer money on the way the grid is being operated. That may be the right answer, but it may be that we should be spending billions of dollars on energy efficiency, right? We don't look at it in that holistic way to determine where should we stop with EE programs, right? So I think more to come on being a more sophisticated, mature way of thinking about things.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, Mose, the out of energy efficiency programs, and I'm sure many of you are market participants, has grown an industry. Energy efficiency has grown an industry. I was looking at some data that Natalie prepared for me, and there are, in the state of Texas, 160,000 jobs created by energy efficiency. That's right behind transmission and distribution, right? And I think ahead of storage. Right? It's behind, So it's a not an insignificant industry. 160,000 jobs, 25,000 alone in Dallas County, and if you put that 160,000 jobs as a city population, that'd be a top 20 city in Texas. It's material, and suddenly that becomes a constituency for these programs, right? And that's the constituency that can come down here and support initiatives to improve the program. So I just wanted to highlight that this isn't charity anymore. And if we continue to look at EE as charity, it's not going to go anywhere. People need to be able to make money in EE and save money to consumers and society. And when we have all of those, when we have that alignment of interests, then this can really take off.
Well, as you said, more to come. This leaves me wanting a lot to hear and talk about a lot more, but I think that we're at time today. It was kind of a speed run through these fascinating subjects. I want to thank all of our panelists so much for being here and for sharing your expertise. And again, yeah, much more to come on this. Thank you all for being here.
One more thing. If you too are interested in joining our sister organization, the Texas Caucus on Climate and Energy, if you're a member, you're a staffer, and your member hasn't joined yet, please come talk to our Executive Director, Patricia Zavala, here about how to plug in. And please do join us for food and drinks in Representative Erin Zwiener's office. I'll take a group of folks. If you don't know where her office is, it's on E2 908. E2 908, and I will happily walk with a group if y'all want to join us for beer, wine, and some appetizers. Thank y'all so much for being here. We really appreciate you coming out. Have a good evening.